Hey, it's Rami, and today I'm gonna do something different. Right, I'm just gonna sit back here and I'm gonna talk about my history with computers and with games and stuff. It's just gonna be like a story time kind of thing, and very laid back, and completely unscripted. So, I'm just gonna go back all the way from as far as my memory can remember and talk about my first computer, my second one, and all the ones that I remember having. I've had quite a lot of them, and I'm just gonna sort of tell you about them and tell you about my experiences with them. And I still have some of them actually, which is pretty cool. So anyway, my first computer, this goes back all the way as far back as I can possibly remember. Like I don't really remember much before this. Was so when I was a kid, when I was like, I don't know, 3 or something. I used to like 3 and on up until I was like maybe 7 or 8 or 9 or something. It was a long time of my childhood. I used to spend a lot of time in my dad's office. This really this building that was just around in the city. It was like an office building, your classic 1990s office building where you had your like 386 and 486 PCs all over the place. So my dad had a 486 in his office, but he also had a 386 that he used before that, still laying around, and he set that computer up for me in like the secretary room outside of his office. And it was like a really nice little setup right there, and it was like all just for me to play games in his office. Like they'd be doing business in there and people would be going in there and out, and I'd just be sitting there on that little 386 playing video games. So this computer didn't have really any sound in it. It had a sound card, which was a Sound Blaster 16 CT2940, but this was a plug and play sound card, and we didn't really know how to get it configured in DOS and Windows 3.1. That's kind of a Windows 95 thing. You put it in there and it just works. So it had no sound. It was just PC speaker, and that's how I played my first games, like Lynx 386, A10, Wolfenstein 3D, Superplex, and that kind of stuff. There was one golf game other than Lynx 386. It was like a PGA Tour game. I remember really nice looking CGA graphics. And there was this one like educational game. I can't remember the name of it, but like when I ran it, the PC speaker sound was so loud, and it was like scared the living shit out of me when I was a kid. I ran it on my 386 again because I still have it sitting over there, and the speaker is not as loud as it was when I was a kid. But man, it's such a funny memory. But yeah, like even so with this computer, even years later down the line, I remember taking it out and dusting it out and trying out to run Doom on it, and Doom that was hilarious running Doom on the 386. It just doesn't run well. You don't play it on a 386. It's not meant for that. Even though some people did try, you would just shrink the window down and it would run smoother. But Superplex, I remember back in middle school, I dig the 386 out again, and my Superplex file, like the farthest one I ever have of all, is still on there, and the hard drive still works. My 386 had 4 megabytes of RAM, a Western Digital WD-C or WD90C00. That's the Western Digital card I had. Extremely slow, even though a lot of the later Western Digital cards were fast. Back when Western Digital made video cards, they're not really known for that these days. They're known for their storage, like hard drives and stuff, which they also made back in the day. My hard drive actually was a Connor though, a Connor hard drive, and it has a very unique sound. I love the sound of that hard drive. And all old hard drives really sound nice and unique to me. I love that sound because it even though it was like made your computer loud and noisy, and it wasn't just the noise of the heads moving, just the platters spinning was a noisy sound. You could hear it, you know, but it was very, I don't know, I felt it was comforting. And when I have my original 486 still running, because it still works, the original hard drive and everything, I really just, it just brings me back, you know. That's just really a nice and nostalgic sound. So back to the early memories. My dad once took me to his friend's house, as I think it was an apartment, and the guy gave him a floppy disk, and he told him the game was really good, and so my dad installed it on his computer. I think it was the 480. He did it on both the 386 and the 486, and it was Wolfenstein 3D. And Wolfenstein 3D, he showed it to me when I was a kid, and we both were just hooked on that game. And it not exactly the game you want to show your kid, but my dad also had Doom. That was also another one of the earliest games that I played, and Doom is probably and Wolfenstein 3D. Those two are probably the most like influential games for me, and the ones that I absolutely love the most, and just sort of always reference as my favorite games. Later down the line, Half-Life joined that list, but those games, along with like Duke Nukem 3D, I played a lot of that one. That was one of my favorite games as a kid as well. I also played a lot of Rot, Rise of the Triad, and Heretic, and these early first-person shooters just really shaped like my interest in games. But I played so many other DOS games. The whole entire DOS thing to me was like just so, it was just like such a good memory to me, just sitting there at the DOS prompt, hitting DIR and looking through all the games and stuff. I absolutely love that, and I wish that I could go back to that office and set it up with my computers the way it was, because my dad actually still owns that office, and I still go there just to look at the place again. And you know, I remember sitting there playing all these DOS games, like, you know, the DOS port of Arkanoid, Aladdin. So we also had a 486 at home, and I think we had Aladdin on that one. The 486 that we had at home was the one that I kept, and I still have like the hard drive in there working. And all these games that I had, Aladdin, Cosmo, you know, Duke Nukem 3D, ran like crap on a 486 as well. Epic Pinball, Electronoid, this is like a little Arkanoid clone. Ken's Labyrinth is super nostalgic to me. I love that game. The music in that game, every time I hear it, I'm just like warped right back to the past. It's so beautiful. I love that music, and I love how strange and unique that game is. You don't hear about Ken's Labyrinth anymore among like people who play retro games that much. It's super obscure and underrated, but man, that game's great. I mean, there's also, yeah, I mentioned Lynx 386, one of my earliest games ever. My dad was into these like golf games and flight simulators, and so my first games ended up being like A10, Red Baron, and Lynx 386. Great games. I really like those games, even though they are like very much dad games. I also had Stellar, which is like a battle zone kind of game. Skyroads. Oh man, Skyroads. That game was amazing. Very difficult, very trial and error heavy. You're in this car and you're jumping down these treacherous roads, and you have to like make it to the end and stuff. And every time you blow up or fall off, you start from the beginning. And I just recently beat the entire game on my 486 hard drive, like on the original one, and it was very nice and fulfilling. And so many of these. There's a game called Viper, like a little game where you control like a snake and it goes around getting bigger. It's just basically the Nokia snake game, but in DOS format. And yeah, SQ1, Star Quest 1 in the 27th Century is another one. Yeah, so many of these games. I mean, there's probably even more that I forgot about. Let's see, Pickle Wars, Prince of Persia 2, Sango Fighter. Can't forget about that one. I played that one a ton with my cousins. We had the Jazz Jackrabbit Christmas version, and the Christmas version of Skyroads as well. The Christmas versions was a really nice little DOS thing. I miss those days. Also had Extreme Pinball, but I don't know if I had that on the 486. That might have been on a later computer that we had. But all these games that I played are some of my favorites, the DOS games, and they're the first ones that I played. I did go on later to play like Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis. My cousins had a Super Nintendo. They're the ones who introduced me to the Super Nintendo and consoles in general. I didn't even know that you could play a game on a TV. I thought that was freaking awesome. And when I saw Super Mario World, I was like, oh my god, this is the greatest game ever. And I just, every time I would go there, I would go upstairs and play Super Mario World right away. And my dad, whenever it would be time to go, I would throw a fit like a little freaking brat, just kicking and screaming, no, I want to stay and play Mario! But yeah, eventually I asked him to get me a Super Nintendo, but he got me a Sega Genesis instead. And I wasn't upset. I actually really ended up loving the Sega Genesis. I played it and I thought that Sonic was amazing. Super colorful, beautiful music, and it became one of my favorite games too. But eventually later on, we got some other games like Sonic 2 and Aladdin. Those games were also great. Aladdin was a game that I already had on DOS. I had probably mentioned that before. But we also had, like, later on, my dad got me the Super Nintendo with games like Star Fox and Final Fight and eventually Super Mario World. And that was like, when I got that game, I played through it like crazy. I beat every single level many times. I beat the game over and over and over and over again. That's probably my most beat game ever that I've ever played. Like, I've beat it so many times, and it's still to this day one of my all-time favorite games. I still play like crazy ROM hacks of Super Mario World. I've done a few streams of one of them, I think. And yeah, Super Mario World is like a masterpiece in my opinion. I think it's to this day, it's one of the games that you should study if you're gonna make like a 2D platformer. Super Mario World was probably the one I played the most on the Super Nintendo, but I did have a lot of other games. Star Fox was great. I never beat that game as a kid. That game is hard, really hard. There was also Final Fight. That game is like impossible on Super Nintendo. Like, it's not like the arcade where you can just keep putting quarters in. The Super Nintendo was brutal, and I couldn't even beat the dude with the swords, Katana or whatever his name was. Kicked my ass every single time. But there was also Street Fighter, which my cousins let me borrow, and I used to play it at their house a lot. They were really good at Street Fighter, and they kicked my ass. But I was really into learning the special moves in Street Fighter, and I could never get it down. And I'm just playing against the AI, keep in mind, so it's like, I'm not fighting against anyone. When I was fighting against my cousins, they would just crush me. It's crazy. But while my cousins had the Super Nintendo, I actually had a system that they didn't, and that was the 486. And I remember every time when they came over to my house, like before I got my Super Nintendo, they would run up the stairs every single time to play the games. Like, they didn't have a computer like we did, so they would run up the stairs and play like Superplex. And my cousins, to this day, their high scores are still on the computer, and I haven't beaten them at all. But even in other games, they had like names in there that I just would not even bother to save over it when it asked me to. It was really funny. And that's how it is with all the other save files. I have save files on there from like 1996, 1997 and stuff. I mean, it was really fun playing those games back in the day. Those are games that like my whole family knows, and everyone who knew me as a kid, I knew that I would never shut up about these games, like all these video games that I've talked about. So, but eventually, we kept getting the newer systems, and I stopped really getting into computer gaming after the DOS support stopped happening. I didn't really, get into the 3DFX graphics games or any of the 3D accelerated PC games. I sort of stepped over to the console side. So I had a Nintendo 64, and I would play all those games. Mario 64 was a huge part of my childhood, and I played that game like crazy. It's basically, just the same story with Super Mario World, but with Mario 64. That's probably my second most favorite console game. in my opinion. I think. But I also had like GoldenEye. We played a lot of GoldenEye with my cousins and stuff. My other cousin had The World Is Not Enough, and we played that a lot. That game is really fun with multiplayer. I really like that game. And we had Mario Kart. We played Mario Kart with my cousins, and we played just the Nintendo 64 was such a good system for having like 4-player get-togethers. I really miss that. I don't like online gaming. In my opinion, online gaming is just like, it's still very lonely to me. You know, I don't feel the same as when I have another person in the room just cracking jokes with, you know? That's, in my opinion, the most, you know, that's like real company to me. And, you know, when I got later, when I'm older down the line, you know, we got the PS2, and I really got obsessed with Grand Theft Auto. Played that a lot. Grand Theft Auto Vice City, and Grand Theft Auto 3, and Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. The first PS2 game I ever played was Metal Gear Solid 2. That was the first PS2 game I ever seen, and I was blown away by the mechanics in that game, how you can just like drag bodies around and hide them, and the way everybody reacts to your sound, like your footsteps, and you know, if you walk in from a wet surface, they'll see your wet footprints, and like on and on and on. The game was incredible. The AI was crazy. And I remember one time I used to visit my friend's house a lot, and we would just, before I even had a PS2, we would just go to Blockbuster and rent PS2 games and play them on his PS2. So I would rent Metal Gear Solid 2, my brother would rent Grand Theft Auto Vice City, and we would both play these amazing games at the time. And I discovered all kinds of crazy cool games that were there. There was this one game called Dr. Muto, and it was like a game about this weird little short mad scientist, like all these weird quirky games that I've seen there, and alongside the masterpieces like Vice City and Metal Gear Solid 2. But eventually we got our own PS2, and I would just play like Vice City, obviously Metal Gear Solid 2. I would also play like racing games like Need for Speed. I would play Midnight Club, Def Jam Fight for New York. I had like so many weird ass games. NBA Street, that game was one of my favorites. Tony Hawk's Underground. Oh man, Underground 1 and Underground 2. Spent so many hours on that. I remember we rented so many different. I think there was a really cool Futurama game my friend rented from Blockbuster. There was actually a port of Half-Life that was really good. I had that back in the day. Half-Life for me, the first time I ever saw that game was in 2001, I think. My friend had it running on his laptop. He had like a compact Presario laptop. I don't really know if it had 3D or anything on it. But keep in mind, I missed out on 3D acceleration altogether. I was still in the DOS game mindset. I really loved Duke Nukem 3D and, you know, that kind of stuff back in the day. I did have Quake, but that was on the Nintendo 64. I didn't have it on PC. Quake on 64 is really good. I actually really recommend that one. It's got good ass music. The Trent Reznor soundtrack is amazing too, but the N64 one has like super underrated music, I think. But Half-Life was amazing to me. It opened with a guy with like that had a valve on his eye. You know, he just had like a big thing with a valve on it, and that kind of scared me as a kid for some reason. And I was a kid. I was, 2001. I was like 8 years old, but it was the most amazing game I seen at the time. It was so realistic to me. Like, I thought the head crabs were scary as hell. It scared the shit out of me. And the game, just like the facility in the game, the Black Mesa Research Facility, was just unbelievably massive. Like, I've been to places like Chicago O'Hare, and I remember my dad telling me like, this place is so huge, it's like its own little city. Black Mesa Research Facility is pretty much that. It's like its own city, and it's not a little city. That thing is friggin' massive. I was blown away at how it just doesn't end. You just go and go and go from it. It feels like you ran across the whole country. It was an amazing game, and yeah, I thought it was really cool, and I really wanted to play it, but we didn't really have a computer that could run that game at the time. Like, I think we still had our 486 back then. I'm not even joking. Like, we used that computer for so long. It's crazy. And But anyway, later on down the line, we did upgrade our computer, and my dad asked his friend, he used to just hang out with, he was a computer guy, if he had any old computers he could give us. And he gave my dad a bunch of these, like, old Pentium 3s and Pentium Socket 7 1s, and Pentium 1 Socket 7 systems, and these kind of AMD Athlons. But my dad also, he gave me and my brother one of those, like a I think it was an Athlon or something, and he got a Pentium 4 for Windows XP, and he kept that in his room. And eventually one day, my dad came back with a bootleg copy of Half-Life 2 from the Middle East. Now, I was a huge Doom fan. Doom was like one of my most important games as a kid. And even before Doom 3 was announced, like, I was a huge Doom 2, actually. Doom 2 might even be even more of a favorite game of mine than Doom 1 was. I played Doom and Doom 2 like crazy as a kid. And even before Doom 3 came out, I was hyped for that game. I was just imagining what Doom 3 would be like. Oh, Doom 3 probably has, like, only bosses as enemies. It must be the craziest game ever. And eventually, Half-Life 2 came out. That game completely blew my expectations of Doom 3 out of the water. I didn't even care about Doom 3 at that point. That game looked so realistic to me. I couldn't even believe the graphics. Like, it looked, in my opinion, that was like the peak of graphics. Like, this is the plateau. Can they even look better than this? Like, I doubt it. I don't think they can. Obviously, they can. A lot better. You can totally see the age in Half-Life 2 today, but in my opinion, it still does look pretty good by today's standards. I still like the way that game looks, and the Source engine has just been, man, it's been used for so long. Like, 17 years or something, they're still using Source for games like Apex and Titanfall and stuff. But I spent a long time playing Half-Life 2. I remember taking my time with that game, just absolutely observing and sinking in every little bit of atmosphere. I was so curious about that whole world. It really felt like a really just lived-in world. It was amazing. Just looking around at everything, all the little graffiti marks on the wall, the little posters, every little detail in that game. I was just like, it was just curious to me. I'd never seen anything like that back then. It was such a huge leap for me. And I really just, I wish I could experience that again, something like that. That's truly a once-in-a-lifetime experience when it comes to gaming. Because pretty much these days, graphics just, in my opinion, from like the PS3 onwards, they don't really look that much different from today's games. I mean, stuff like Saints Row, that obviously shows its age, but when you compare, like, I don't know, Killzone to the new Call of Duty Modern Warfare, I don't know, I just don't really see the difference as much as I did between, like, Doom and Half-Life, It's just amazing. So, moving on from the Pentium 4, I still got, Doom 3, I played that a lot, and I loved that. But anyway, I moved on and I got a computer much later than that. Like, I didn't really use computers anymore. I stuck to consoles a little bit after that. So PS3, Xbox 360, I got like a lot of the PC classics. I remember getting Half-Life 2 on the orange box on, the 360. I had the orange box on the PC as well, played it on there. My Pentium 4 wasn't really up to the task of running Episode 2 with that high of a frame rate, but I did enjoy it still. I played the whole thing on PC. And I enjoyed it on console too, because I got to play it on a big screen. Like, we had a big screen TV downstairs in my dad's basement, and that was really fun. But, I didn't really play PC games much after that until 2013, which is like many years later down the line. They announced a remake of Rise of the Triad, which was one of my favorite DOS games as a kid. Rise of the Triad is a game where, like, it was like a Wolf 3D sequel kind of thing that didn't really get, didn't really get the green light to be a Wolf 3D sequel. So Tom Hall and Apogee made it their own little thing and just went crazy with all the features, because it was using a Wolf 3D engine, a modified one, which was very limited. but the game is so much fun, and in my opinion, it's still one of the funnest DOS games you could play. It's too much fun. But they announced a remake in 2013, and I remember thinking, wow, I don't have any, computers that can run this game, and I want to play it really badly because it's a computer game only, PC. So eventually, I got this computer from Craigslist. It was just like a AMD Phenom X2 with a GTS 250 and 4 gigabytes of DDR2 RAM. This computer ran the game really well, but the game would crash at like the second episode. Like, you'd fight Darien and you go to the second episode. I think the level after that it would crash. So I never got to finish the game until I bought a laptop, like a really nice Razer laptop. It cost me freaking so much money. It cost me so much money. But I made good use of that laptop. That was a really nice laptop, and it lasted me a very long time. I still have it, but that thing is not really doing well. It's in bad shape. I should try it and see if it works. That'd be funny. Anyway, that's getting pretty close to the recent territory. So, in 2016, LGR made a video about building a 486. LGR is someone who I've been watching since he started. Me and him both pretty much started at the same time, and I remember watching him when he was like, really, like, he didn't have as many subscribers as he had today. It was like in the tens of thousands or something. But I remember him being like the center of all that, retro PC content, and I absolutely loved his content. I was like, he reminded me of myself, like his love of like ad-lib music and all that stuff, and it was really just cool to see that there's more people online that are into this kind of stuff than just me. But later down the line, he made that video building a 486, and I remembered I actually have my 486 somewhere, and I went and I grabbed it out and I restored it. I just dusted it out, gave it a new CMOS battery and everything, and it worked. Like, I actually fixed it, and I was playing DOS games on my 486 again. And I had some CRTs in the storage. Keep in mind, all those computers that the dude, my dad's friend, gave me all those years ago were still sitting up there, and all the monitors and everything. And so I was like, alright, I'll just throw, a computer together, all these parts. I found everything I needed to build the 486 back, and it was great. And I still had my 386 there. Like I said, I would power that on, every few years just to check on it. CMOS battery was dead and it had leaked, but it didn't destroy the board, thankfully. So I just got started on this crazy retro PC journey, and here I am today. I built a Pentium 1, which was sitting in the storage. I found the motherboard and everything free. Those things are expensive today. Same with the Pentium 3. I recapped that motherboard, and I gave it a new, I gave it new capacitors. I gave it a new power supply. Put it in a new case, which is really nice. I restored the Dell Optiplex Pentium 4 system and sort of turned it into like a Windows XP computer, which was the same as the one I used back in the day. Not exactly, but very close. Better video card, obviously. I had a Radeon 92 SE in my original one, and I don't want another one of those. Those suck. And then I built this Core 2 Duo, which was a generous donation from Radar Cornflakes. Thank you so much, Eddie. And I just got so many donations from people after I started this Twitter account, and have just been posting about, documenting my hobby and everything. And it's been really fun. Just all these computers and all these games. I've learned so much about them over the years. I knew nothing about them before before I started building computers recently. I didn't really know much about them. I messed with them as a kid and stuff. I took out the sound cards and everything, and I looked at them, and I just, admired them. Didn't really know what the hell I was supposed to do with them. But recently I learned about everything, like so much about 486s and 386s. And I built myself a really big ass 486, with totally separate parts. Like, I got a brand new old stock case, and I put all these components in there. And it didn't even come with a power supply, so I had to do the whole AT power supply thing myself, and it was really janky. It was just not good. But it works, and it's good. just really, really, really like hardcore brute force modding. I'll make a video about that computer one of these days. I've been meaning to do that. But anyway, that pretty much sums up my history with PCs and computer games, and I really enjoy it. It's great. Oh, I did forget to mention one thing though. The i7 that I built recently. I built this computer right before the horrible PC shortage happened. It's got an i7 9700K, 32 gigabytes of DDR4, and 2080 RTX, and yeah, it's a great system, and I'm recording this video on it right now on this system. But yeah, that's my history with PC games and with PCs and stuff. It's fun talking about this stuff. I love talking about it and showing you everything here. But let me know your history with PCs and computer games. I would love to, hear about all your stories. So, anyway, thank you for those of you who listened. Take care.